today. As we have mentioned previously, today is International Other Languages Day, and it's a skill that we believe at Founders for Schools can be very helpful to young people in their future career. We've got a couple of guest speakers with us today, Claire and Melissa, and we'll be hearing from them later. But just to set the scene, I'm Alison. I'm from Founders for Schools. We're a charity who likes to inspire and support young people in making decisions about their future careers and giving them some information about the types of skills that employers are looking for in their future workforce. And today in particular, that skill that we're looking at is languages. For the audience members that are joining us, if you could make sure that your video and your sound is off, just to make sure that everything works okay, and we can hear the recording and the speakers clearly. But other than that, you can add questions in the chat box, but please do just enjoy the session and hopefully you'll learn something. I am just going to post some information, some little polls that we'd like you to take part in, just to start off with, so we can get a bit of an understanding of what's going on. But let's take us back to what we're here to talk about today, which is languages in the world of business. And as I mentioned, we have Claire and Melissa here with us today, so thank you very much for joining us. What I thought we could do is if the two of you could just give us your job title or what you do, and then after that we'll hear a little bit about your career journey and how you got to where you are today. So maybe if you'd like to start, please, Claire.
Sure. Hello. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me along today. It's delighted to be here, despite all the blustery winds and storms that have been blowing in, trying to cut me off every minute. So I am Claire Black. I'm Managing Director of a strategic comms, business growth and marketing agency in the UK, although it is a global entity, has clients worldwide. It's a brand new job for me. I started 3 weeks ago. And before that, I was... and I'm still alive. And before that, I was Director of Corporate Affairs and Communications at Innovate Finance, which is a trade body for fintech companies in the UK.
Excellent. And that is actually what I have you down as, so it's nice to know that you've got a new job. So good luck and well done for that. Okay, what about yourself, Melissa?
Yeah, hi everyone. Hi Claire, and congrats for the new job. I know that it's exciting. Yeah, and so as myself, like I'm new to this job. I started working there in August, so probably the pandemic has something to do with it. I'm not sure. Yeah, a lot of movement in the different sectors. But I am Elisa Leñero. I come from Mexico City, but I live in London, although currently I am in Cambodia. And what I did, I founded my companies before. So I have founded some companies around technology, sustainability, and design. And I created my design studio. But after that, I came to London to study my master's. And after that, I co-founded another company in London. But because of the pandemic and everything that was happening personally, and we can talk about more later about this, I recently joined an NGO. So I'm coming from a business background, but now I moved to a non-for-profit organization. So like I needed to learn all the new language around what it takes to work in a new world, a new industry. And my position now, I'm a senior design manager and strategist at the Innovation Lab, which is a tiny innovation lab inside this huge NGO that is based in Denver. And the innovation lab started in Cambodia. Therefore, here I am meeting the team. And eventually I'm going to go back to London. But basically, I work my work functions as a consultant, going around different places in the world, foreseeing some of these projects and supervising the projects that we have globally.
Excellent. So two very almost relatable skills in a lot of sense, lots of communication, a lot of strategy, but still very different worlds. So excellent. Well, okay, so let's get to some questions then. So firstly, we'll start with how many languages do you speak and what are they?
Do you want me to kick
off? And either of you can answer. Yep, please. Yep.
Okay, I speak two foreign languages. Obviously, English is my mother tongue. I speak French, probably bilingually now. I studied French and international business at university, and worked in French-speaking countries for 10 years after that, and still use it quite regularly. And I also learned German. I studied that up to A level, so I've probably got, I would say, a working-ish knowledge of it. I'd probably need to go back and live in Germany and brush up a bit to be able to use it again. But an A level in a language, I think, gives you a very good grounding and a sound understanding. And I also write in Braille, because which I class as another language, because my eldest son is blind, so I've had to learn Braille as well along the way.
Okay, most definitely is another language, one that is very important. So yeah, okay. How about you, Melissa?
Yeah, well, Claire, that's impressive. I just, and I say just, but actually I speak Spanish. It's my mother tongue. And I speak fluent English. And also I read French. I understand French, but I studied French when I was in high school. But because I didn't practice it, then I lost it a little bit. And then I studied Mandarin for a while. And of course, I don't know Mandarin. So I wouldn't say that I know Mandarin. Yeah, but I tried. So that's what I mean. Like, trying is the first step.
Absolutely.
Yes, yep. I'm the same as German. I can do Turkish German, but not much past that. And I have tried a lot to learn. But okay, so when you have been out, and you both sound as though you've maybe worked in different countries. How did you learn the languages to move to that country, or did you know the languages before you went there? How did you start your learning journey for languages, and how has it helped you in your career? Maybe start with you, Claire.
Okay, so yes, I had learned my languages before I went to live and work in the countries that I ended up in. I always really enjoyed languages at school. I started off with French when I was about 13, I think 12 or 13, secondary school. Seems a long time ago now. And then because I was good, or deemed good at languages, I then got to do German as a second language, which was, I actually wanted to do Spanish, but they didn't do Spanish in my school, so I ended up doing German instead. And then I carried both of those on to A level, because I really, really enjoyed them, and had decided at that point that I would really like to use my languages and go and live and work in a different country. I grew up in a really small village in northeast Lincolnshire, went to a comprehensive school there. And I was the first person in my family to go away to university. I was the eldest of 3 kids at the time, although another one was born while I was at university, a late addition. So for me, languages were my ticket out. I knew that I didn't want to stick around in that small village. I wanted to go and discover the big wide world. And I'd had a bit of a taste of that when I did the French exchange when I was at school, when I was 14. I got on so well with my French exchange friend, who I was matched up with. We're still in touch to this day, which is fab. And I went to see her and her family just last year and introduced them to my youngest son, who they've never met, who's also learning French at the moment. So it's fab. So yes, I then decided I wanted to carry on with my French at university. I also did economics as an A level because I was really interested in going into business. I didn't quite know what or how I would do that, but I looked around for university courses that combined language with business. There weren't many at the time. It was mainly language as a literature. Oh gosh, I can't even speak anymore. Literary subject. But there were 5 or 6 universities at the time. It was in the late 80s who offered that option. So I went around and visited them all, up to Scotland, right down to Bath, and ended up at Aston University in Birmingham, which included a year out studying in a French business school in Nantes on the west coast of France. And I would say that's when I became really what I would class as fluent in the language, because I kind of went there with my 2 years of uni French thinking, yeah, I'm all right, I can do this. And I was fine in the lessons because that's what I'd been studying. But when I actually got there and I had to speak to people, in the bus on the way to school in the morning, that I realized that actually I didn't know a lot of French. Like I didn't know the, you know, the slang French and the chat, and found that really, really tough to start with. I went there in August, and up until December, it was a hard slog, I must say, doing lessons all day in French and then socializing in French as well. But once I went back in the new year, something clicked, and there we are. So I'll maybe leave it at there. I did go to work in France as soon as I graduated from university, and I then in Champagne, in the champagne industry, I did a little bit of marketing as well, and then I completely changed tack and went to live in West Africa, initially just for a month in Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, and then ended up living there for 6 years. So that was a very different learning experience in the language, because it was a very different accent to get to grips with as well. But I'll maybe pass over to you, Melissa, so you can talk about your journey.
Yeah, thank you. Well, right now that I'm in Cambodia, a lot of people have said that to me, that I'm here for 4 months, but then people, yeah, every time that I meet a new person, it's like, oh yeah, that was me 8 years ago. So let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think for me, languages were part of my, so as I said, like I grew up in Mexico, and because we're very close to the US, for me, it was normal to have a bilingual upbringing since I was little. But I think it was more my mom's vision of like, I want you to be bilingual since the beginning. So I studied English when I was very, very little. But although you would be surprised that even though I studied it for a long time, when I arrived to London, I was like, I don't know English. Like it's completely different to the English that I knew before, like the American English. So yeah, like the slang, accent, the different wording, like the way of like structuring the sentences is completely different. So yeah, I struggle a lot when I arrived to London, and that was like 6 years ago. And in my life, like I studied different languages because I was interested, but it was not like my main interest. For me, it was more like the things that I want to go, or like the things that I want to see, or the places that I want to go. And then language was kind of like the second layer that for me was like, oh yeah, by the way, they don't speak the same language. So I need to do something to bypass that, or to either learn the language or to overcome that. So for example, I studied in Beijing, and I stayed there for 6 months. And as I said, like I studied Mandarin, but of course I was not fluent when I arrived. So for me, language is more about, like, it's less about learning the language and expressing it, but also like how you could convey the idea with different props and different things that you can express, like drawings, or like, you know, like right now I'm in Cambodia, for example, and they speak Khmer. And it's very different because the language is not the Arabic, like the numbers are not Arabic. Everything is coming from Sanskrit. So even like just seeing the language is completely different to what Westerners are used to, or like even the people that are used to our language, let's say like Arabic numbers and Romance languages. Yep. So it's very different. So even though I would learn Khmer, I don't think it will open like new doors to me. I think it's more a way of understanding how you can work through these barriers, that one of them is language, but then how you bypass them by explaining what you want to explain and using different different tools that are available for you. So yeah, that was kind of like that has been my structure of or like my understanding of language.
Okay. And when did you first understand that taking that step to learn a language, even if you don't become fully fluent in it, would help you achieve your goals in your career? Is that something that came to you quite early, or was it something that took a while for you to realize that learning the language, no matter if you're not fully fluent, it still has a benefit to you when you're doing work?
I think I realized that when I went to actually live in the country, and I did that for 3 weeks when I did the French exchange when I was 14, I think, as I said. And then I went to live in, we had friends in Germany. So I went to live there for 6 weeks actually before I did my A-level, so I could really practice for my oral exam. And I think and I always found German a bit harder than French. It didn't come as easy, but I just realized then, you know, when you're immersed in it and you can't necessarily understand everything, it's just about a mindset more than anything. I would say it allows you to really understand what makes you know, different people tick. And I've lived in a few different places around the world. I've traveled to, you know, I've been lucky enough with all of my jobs actually. And maybe you could say it's because I like languages and that's made me a very open, outward looking person. I'm therefore naturally attracted to doing that sort of thing. I found it immensely frustrating the past 2 years. I can't believe last year I didn't actually get to leave the country for the first time in, I don't know, 42 years. I kept getting thwarted by COVID. So that's really weird for me not to have left the country. But I think, I don't know if I really appreciate it. I don't think I set out to think, you know, I'm going to do a language because it's going to help me in my career. I wanted to learn languages because I was good at them. I really enjoyed them. I enjoyed learning about new things, new people, new cultures. I was quite fascinated by that. And my own personal family circumstances. My name is Black. It was actually Schwarz to start with. And my great grandparents came over from what was then Austro-Hungary and a bit of Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic now, and they came over to the UK and to America actually, and some in the family had to change their name because of issues during the war, but we had that sort of, I suppose, that connection of languages as well, which was lurking in the past, even though my grandparents both spoke English rather than German, but my great grandpa, who I don't remember, he had a very German accent and struggled with his English. I've seen some of his writing and it's very broken English. So for me, it was more what it offered. It was the excitement of learning and going to see new things. And then I would say the career was an added bonus.
Yeah. Right. How about you, Melissa? Was that similar or different experience for you?
Yeah, I think for me, I always knew that, and probably, yeah, I think it's because of our different upbringings, but for me, it was always a matter of, if you want to work in a different setting and achieve a different level of progression in your professional career, you should learn another language. And that language means English, which is the common language that we use when we are working, right? So for me, it was, because I knew already Spanish, for me, it was like, it was a no-brainer to learn English. And that was kind of like focused entirely on the professional setting. However, I would say that now that I'm consulting and I have to move to different countries, it might be impossible for me to learn Khmer and then French and then Arabic and probably, you know, like so many languages out there that for me, it's like, because I know already English, then I just need to refine my English to make it better, but also refine the French that I know. And perhaps, as I said, like use different tools and be very clever about how I can communicate with other people. But saying that, I think definitely languages open you a different world and a different layer of understanding. And I would say that when I speak in English, all the emotions that I know in Spanish, they are completely different. Like, even though if I want to communicate something very emotional in English, it's very different and in Spanish. So I think in that sense, it's very important to know why you want to use the language in the first place. Is it because you like it and you want to read more about, like, in that language? For example, reading more about, like, in French, I cannot imagine like all the different nuances that you can get by reading in a different language, right? And I think that happens to me when I read in English or in Spanish. But perhaps that's not exactly per se professional. But when I'm talking, like when I'm having like this type of sessions, for example, that I'm getting invited to give different lectures, definitely knowing like the nuances when you are discussing, like the nuances of the different language, it's really important when you are also conveying an idea. So it's kind of like you have to be sure how you're going to use the language. In my case, I cannot learn all of the languages that I'm going to be part of in my consultancy job, but I'm sure that I'm going to be able to express my ideas through English and perhaps sometimes in Spanish. For example, my boss, she's Spanish, and I can tell that when we are talking in Spanish, we connect in another level because it's our mother tongue. So things are easier, faster, and yeah, like you connect with people because of language. So I would say that yeah, when I talk to some people in my work that they don't know other language, it's it's different. Like sometimes they are not as empathetic as someone else that really knows the struggle when you are trying to communicate in a different language. And they are very they are not forgiving, right? So then you are like, well, sorry, but I don't know some of the languages or the expressions that you're using, even though I know English, but I'm not, I was not in the same or generation, or like I don't know all the slang or like all the different nuances of your language. So that also kind of like puts a barrier between two people, even though we're speaking in English, for example.
Yeah, the classic use of idioms.
I find it fascinating watching my eldest son grow up. My ex-husband is French, so my eldest son's dad, and he grew up a bit in Ivory Coast, a bit in New York, and then flitting back and forth between the UK and France. And so he truly is bilingual. He has absolutely zero accent when he speaks French, so he speaks French like a French person, and he speaks English like an English person, which I always find highly annoying. So I've still got an English accent when I speak French, even though I am fluent in it. But when he was learning to speak both languages, he obviously didn't realize that they were two different languages. It was just a slightly different way of saying something. And so he would realize when speaking with grandparents, if he spoke in English to French grandparents, he'd get the sort of blank, slightly panicked look. So he would just immediately switch to doing it the other way, because he knew then that he couldn't see, obviously, that they were smiling at that point, but he could hear in their voice that there was a relaxation, and he'd swap to the other language. So it's interesting how how different it can be learning.
Oh, and I think Claire's connection has just frozen there. Yeah. Oh, you're back with us there. Thank you. Sorry. Froze there just a tiny little bit. Okay. So you both actually, I think you've kind of touched on that, but I think it's an important question for the young people listening to understand. You work in a global market. A lot of people now, for lots of different jobs, it's more of a global role than maybe it was historically. Do you think, or do you see a trend where your workforce or your industry thinks that languages are more important going forward? Is it becoming more of a selling point to have a language? Or do you think it's always been the case?
I think it's always been the case, personally. I would say being English and therefore having the luxury, because I think a lot of English speakers don't realise, I would say, how lucky they are that it's just there and it's their mother tongue, and they can travel all over the world, and generally somebody will understand them. It can make you a bit lazy sometimes being an English person, but having that ability to really speak and be conversant and to be able to do business, because it's not just about speaking the language, it's as Melissa was saying as well, it's about understanding what the nuances of that are and what the behavior is, and how, if certain things are happening in a meeting, to be able to understand, even though it's not being spoken, and just understand and really get into the head of how different people from different countries react to certain situations, or how they actually make decisions. And what you can find, sometimes I find that intensely frustrating, that French people will generally just all get more of a group agreement, whereas in the UK we're just like, no, right, yeah, we've made that decision, move on, off we go. And I found that really, really hard to start with, and had to learn to adapt my behavior accordingly. So I think if you can, you know, if you have that skill, and even if you don't necessarily speak the language completely fluently, but you can do one or two fluently, I think that makes you more open, and therefore, you know, you've got an idea of the fact that not everything's going to work in the same way, and that's a real skill and a real selling point, especially, as you say, you know, in today's world where it is a lot more global, and you're more likely to work with, you know, so many people from very different backgrounds and different countries to yourself, wherever you are in the world.
For me, and in my experience, yeah, fairly similar at the beginning. In a private world, I think the common language is English. Even though you are working, I worked in Mexico, for example, and of course there the language was just Spanish, but we had a lot of foreigners coming into Mexico City, and in the place that I was working and with the people that I was working, sometimes we had some projects in the US, so like hiring people there as well and working with people there and communicating in English. So I would say that in the private sector, at least in my experience, I worked in the US, I worked in Germany and in the UK. I always needed just to speak English. So it was like the common language. But I would say that now that I'm working on a non-for-profit, like for me, and something that also Claire mentioned, like it's about the connection that you are making with someone else, and at least try to make that connection. So when I'm here, like the time that I've been in Asia, like I lived in Asia 1 year and then I came back, and just by knowing just to say thank you or like hi, or you know, like trying to learn how to say different things, although you're not going to learn the whole language or you're not going to be fluent, but at least you're trying. And I think that represents, like, that means that you care and that you want to make a connection with the people. Yeah. So I would definitely say that if it's just a professional matters, then perhaps English, it's just okay. But now that I'm working in an NGO, like we have a lot of conversations with people that don't speak English. They don't have to, because they are doing field work in the countryside where people don't speak English. They just speak their language, Khmer or French, or, you know, different languages that are not necessarily, like, people don't need to know English. So that's why we hire either translators or people in the field that they know the language and they can translate to us. So I would say that if you want to really be global and to really connect with people, I would suggest learning a different language rather than just English, or at least try to, because that means that you care and that you are trying to be empathic with the other people and the other person that doesn't know the language. But you can always going to be able to do business in English. So yeah, that would be my experience.
I really agree with you about just learning those few basic words in the language. I know when I've traveled around and often do speeches and presentations, and I will generally try and learn how to say, you know, hello, my name is, thank you. Sometimes gets you in hot water because people then think you can actually speak the language, and they come up to you afterwards and suddenly ask you a whole question, and you sort of at that point.
That happens to me. Yeah, that happens to me here. Like when you want to get a taxi, let's say a cab, here it's just tuk-tuks, right? So the guy just comes in a scooter, and then I'm always saying like "Soksabai," which is like a nice way of saying hi. And when I say "Soksabai," they're like, "Oh, Soksabai," and then they keep talking. I'm like, no, I don't know anything, just Soksabai and thank you, which is I completely blank out. But anyway, yeah, like just the basics, and be sure, like the thing that I really learned in Mandarin is just to say "wo buchidao," which is I don't know. So I always like greeted someone or say thank you to someone, but afterwards immediately I say "wo buchidao," like Mandarin. So yeah.
Well, there's the quick guide to learning languages. Okay, well, on that, ladies, we've now come to the end of the session, but thank you very much for that. I'm sure that's very helpful for all the young people out there. and you've given them some real things to think about the fact it's not just about learning the words, it's also about the empathy and the culture that goes along with it. So thank you. I'm just going to post some very quick polls for the attendees.
I'm going to say that thank you says Akun. So I remember.
Thank you very much. Thank you for everybody taking part, for the speakers and for the people who joined us. We will be sharing this webinar with some people who have not been able to attend today, but will be watching it in class later on. So thank you very much, everybody. We hope you enjoyed it. We will be having other sessions like this soon, so please do look out at the Founders for School social channels and on our website, and have a lovely day, everybody. Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.